Hello and welcome to Metric Hub. Today I'm going to give a lecture or a lesson on Business Studies Grade 11, right, on the influence on and control factors relating to the business's environment, right? So I'm going to discuss ways to be involved in business, which is if beneficial to business, ways involved in business, which is beneficial to business. So in other words, I'm going to recap on components of business environments, components of business environments. So I'm going to start with the micro environment, the micro environment. So micro environment refers to all internal factors within a business that directly affect its operations and over which the business has control, right? So a business has control over micro environment. It has control over micro environment, which are the internal factors within a business. So macro environment the refers to refers to the internal factors within a business, within a business, within a business that directly affects its operations and over which the business has control of the business has control over the the internal factors, which are what we call micro environment, which are micro environment, right? So micro environment is the internal factors within a business, right? So let's discuss the internal factors of the business, the internal factors within a business, the internal factors within a business. Right. So this includes one, this includes the vision and the mission of the organization, the vision and the mission of the organization. So the mission and the vision is what the organization wants to achieve and its purpose, what the organization wants to achieve and what's the purpose of the organization, what the business wants to achieve and its purpose. So in other words, a vision gives direction to the organization where it is going. It gives direction, right? So you can find that the business um the business uh might change its its vision and mission to extend or to expand into new markets. It can do that. The business, it can it can it can change its vision and mission to expand the business, to expand into new markets. It can change its what? Its vision and mission in order to expand into new markets. Meaning to say, the business has control over its mission and the vision. It can change. It has control over those um, um, mission and the vision, right? Um, Another internal factor that we're going to discuss is goals, the goals, the goals, and the objectives. The goals and objectives. Right. So, meaning to say, the business can set short and long-term goals. The business can set short and long-term goals. It can set short and long-term goals. And long-term goals or targets. Right. A business can also set long-term and short-term objectives. Right. So meaning to say the business has control over its goals, right? Its goals. It can even change, right? For example, it can change the goals, or it can also set new goals. The organization can set, it can set new goals. It can set new goals and objectives to increase profit. It can set new goals and objectives in order to increase profit, right? So meaning to say the business has full control over its goals and objectives. The business has full control over its goals and objectives. It can set new goals in order to increase profit, right? Another internal factor, which is the macro, in the macro environment, is the management and leadership. 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 Right. So meaning to say, so management involves uh, uh, planning, organizing, leading, and controlling functions. Right. Management. So meaning to say, the organization might change the plan. They also change the way they organize their things. They also can change the way of leading as well as the way of controlling. Right. So we're talking about management. We are talking about these functions. Management. We have what we call these functions, which is block, block abbreviation, block. Right. Do not forget block. Right. Block meaning to say P for planning, L for leading. When you're talking about management functions, don't forget block, organizing, and controlling. Block, block. So these are what you call management functions. These are what you call management functions. Management functions, right? So the business has control over its management functions. It has control over its management functions, right? So in other words, the business can be able to change its management, right, by appointing new staffs to improve productivity. It can also change a new manager, right? It can change, it can appoint a new, uh, can appoint new staff, right? It can appoint new staff to improve productivity, to improve productivity. So meaning to say, the the organization has control over its what? Management and leadership. It has control over its management and leadership, right? And also, uh, it can also change its leadership, can change its leadership to increase employee morale. Employee morale. It can also change its leadership to increase its employee morale. Right. Since low leadership can cause what? Uh, Low employee morale. Right. Let's discuss another factor that the business has control over, an internal factor that the business has control over. Right. So the business also have control over organizational its resources. Right. It has control over its resources. Right. Organizational resources. Organizational resources. The business has control over its resources. Right? When we're talking about resources, we are talking about resources like, e.g., we have human resource, financial resource, physical resource, as well as information resource, physical resource, and information resources. So the business has control over what? Uh, these resources, right? Mean to say it has control over its employees, which is what we call human resource, right? You can even train them and develop them. It can also has control over the financial, right, resources. Whereby we're talking about the cash inflow and the cash outflow of the business. That's financial resource, right? The business has control over the way the money comes in and comes out of the business, right? So here the business can the business the business can train and develop, can train and develop its employees. It has control over the what? The human resource. Can control, can train uh, uh, its human resources. It has control over its human resources. Right. Okay, let's move on to uh, another resource, right? That the business has control over, right? Which is what you call it has control over what? Um, um, it has control over its marketing strategies. It has control over uh, its marketing strategies. its marketing strategies. It has control over its marketing strategies. All right. So meaning to say it can improve its marketing strategy to attract more customers. It can decide to improve its marketing strategies. It can improve its marketing strategies. It can improve its marketing strategies to attract more customers. So meaning to say the business has full control over its marketing strategies. It has full control over its marketing strategies. Right? The business also has control over its business functions. It has control over its business functions. Right? Business functions. It has control over its business functions. Right. So this includes one, we're talking about over its general management. General management. It has control over its general management. Right. Right. It also has control over purchasing. They will decide where to purchase the products. They have a control over, they have full control on over the business has full control over its suppliers, right? Its suppliers, right? They can even bid supply so that they can buy the 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 product with the lowest price but of quality, right? They also have control over its production. So I mean to say they have control over production activities. They have control over production activities. They also have control over marketing, the way they market the products. The business has control over her way of marketing the business. Right? E.g., a business can do discounts or sales promotions. They have control over these promotional strategies. Right? The business also have control over human resource. We've talked about it earlier on. It can even recruit new employees, right, in the business to improve productivity. They have control over finance. It's finance, which is money, the money, the cash within the business. They will decide um, uh, when and where to buy maybe raw materials. They've control over its finances, right? As well as public relations. Public relations. They've control over. It has control over the public relations. The public relations, whereby they will strive to maintain a good relationship with its stakeholders, right, so that the business will have a good image, right. They also have the business also have control over administration. It's administration whereby we are talking about recording, filing, and storing of documents and storing of documents. They have control over these functions. They have control over these functions, right. So meaning to say the business has full control, right, over these functions. The business has full control over these functions. The business have full control over these functions. So meaning to say the business has full control over the micro environment factors. It has full control over the um, macro micro factors. It has full control over micro environment. Right. So let's move on to another environment, which is what we call the market environment, which is what we call the external intermediate environment. The market environment. The market environment. Number 2. Market environment. Right. Which is an external intermediate. The external intermediate, right. Right. So the market environment consists of factors which are outside the business, right? There are factors that are outside the business that directly affect it, but the business has limited control over them. So those are what you call the market environment, right? Consist of consist of consist of factors outside the business that directly affects it, but the business has limited control over them. The business has limited control over these factors. The business has limited control over these factors. Right. So these factors includes the customers, the customers, the customers. These factors includes the customers. Right. So let's talk about the market environment factors. Right. The factors includes right. One, the customers or customers or consumers. So these are the people who buys the products. These are the people who buy the product. The customers or the consumers are the people who buys the product. Are the people who buys the product. These are the people who buys the products and services. These are the people who buys the products or services, right? So you find that customers switch to a competitor offering lower prices in the market. Customers, they normally compare products prices. So if they see that the competitor is offering the same product at a lower price, they end up switching to the competitor, right? So this is how uh, the market environment influence the business, right? So in other words, the business has to lower the price, right? Low to sell the price at a lower price than they have to lower the price lower than the competitor. so that they can be able to sell the products. Right. So customers or consumers switch to a competitor offering lower prices. Right. The businesses they tend to switch switch uh to competitor if the competitor is offering prices at a what so if the competitor is offering at a lower price, if the competitor is offering at a lower price, right, the customers tend to switch businesses, right. Right. Another factor is the suppliers. Two, one, number two, suppliers. Right. So suppliers, those are uh, uh, people who provide raw materials and services to the business. They provide raw materials and services, right, to the business. So you can find that the business has limited control over the suppliers. The business have limited control over the suppliers, whereby sometimes the supplier increases the price of raw materials. The supplier, especially if he's a monopoly, he can increase the price. The supplier increases the price of raw materials. The supplier can increase the price of raw materials, right? So the business has no other choice than to buy the raw materials at the supplier's price, right? So the business has limited control. The business can even switch suppliers if there are many suppliers. So the business has limited control over the what? The suppliers. The suppliers. Right. Let's talk about another factor, which is the competitors. The competitors. The competitors. The competitors. Right. So competitors are those people who are selling the same product, right, with the business. Those are the uh, people who sells the same product in the same market. Those are the people who sell the same product in the same market. The people who sells the same. So in other words, these are other businesses offering the same or a similar product. Businesses offering similar product. Right. Similar products. Right. So the competitors, the competitors, the competitors, um, the competitors also influence the business in the sense that you can find that new competitors will enter the market. Sometimes when they are entering, they will sell products at a lower price, right? So the business has limited control over uh, new new competitors, new competitors entering the market. The new competitor can enter the market at a lower price. That also influence the business, right? Another factor, which is trade unions, they also affect the business. They also influence the business, right? Trade unions. So trade unions are employee representatives in uh, uh, collective bargaining. These are what we call employee relatives. Representatives. Employees, representatives. They represent employees during a dispute in collective bargaining or in resolving a dispute in collective bargaining or in resolving a, a dispute, right? So you can find that trade unions might demand higher wages for employees, right? Trade unions might demand higher wages, right? They may demand higher wages, higher wages for employees. So the organization has limited control over the trade unions. What they do is they are supposed to bargain, right? To collectively agree, right, on a certain uh, amount. So there will be pressure and counter pressure between both parties in order to come up with an agreement, right? We also have another factor, which is the government, the government, the government, the government, right? Is probably the state, ne? The government is the state of the country, the state of a country, government. So you can find that the government will come out with regulations, right? They uh, have regulations on how the business should operate, right? So government regulates and inspect business operations. The government regulates and um, inspect business operations. So this also affects the business. It also influences the business, right? Since the regulations, the registrations are normally costly, especially to small businesses. So it regulates and inspect business operations. Business operations. Right. So, right. Uh, for a business to adore, it becomes costly for businesses to adhere with the regulations. It is costly. It is costly for businesses to adhere with regulations and legislations. It is very costly, right? It is very costly for business to um, adhere with the regulations, right? As well as strategic alliances, alliances, right, which are partners or joint ventures, also have influence on um, the business. Strategic alliances, which are partners or joint venture. Like sometimes they end up come out with their new ways of what operation, especially if they are holding a larger market share in the what in the business, right? They end up maybe deciding on the way uh, on how the business will operate, right? We also have another factor, which is the NGOs. NGOs also influence the business, right? Though the business is control over, uh, has limited control over them, right? Um, NGOs, NGOs, which is non-profit organizations, non-profit organizations, right? So they influence the ethical and social practices. It influences ethical ethical and social practices. So in other words, they can influence the what? The ethical and social practices, right? Whereby they can put pressure on the business to operate ethically, right? Right. So NGOs can influence businesses by putting pressure on businesses to operate ethically. So it also have an influence on the business. It also have an influence on the business. So the business has limited control over non-profit organizations. They have limited control over the 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 market environment. The business has limited control over the market environment. So let's talk about the macro environment. Macro environment. Macro environment, which is number 3. Another type of environment that might influence a control, right, over the business operations, right? Sorry, macro environment. The macro environment. The macro environment, right? So macro environment refers to factors beyond the business control that affect all businesses in the what? In the economy. So I mean to say the business has no control over the macro environment. The business has no control over the macro environment. So it refers to external factors beyond the control of the business that affects all businesses in the economy or in the business environment. Right. So these are the factors that are beyond the organization control. Beyond the organizational control. So let's discuss the factors beyond the organization control. So these factors includes 1, political, economical, environmental. So this includes the abbreviation before we talk about each factor. It is abbreviation for, we can use these factors which includes the what? The abbreviation what? PESTEL. PESTEL, which simply stands for P for political, P for political, E for economical, C for social, T for technological, E for environment, and L for legal. L for legal. PESTEL. PESTEL. The PESTEL factors. So we're going to focus on the PESTEL factors, which are what you call the macro environment. The macro environment, right? So the first factor that we are going to talk about is what you call the environment. The environment. environment, right? Whereby we're talking about the physical environment and the natural environment, scarcity of resources, scarcity of resources, or the availability of resources, scarcity of resources or the availability of resources, right? So, physical environments include the climate changes, the natural resources. These are what you call the the natural environment, whereby we're saying the business has no control over, it has no control over the natural resources and climate. It has no control over the business, sorry, the natural resources and climate. The business has no control over the natural resources and the climate. Right. Um, let's go to number two, another factor, which is what you call uh economic um economic factor, economic factors, economic factors, economic factors or environment. Right. So economic environment consists of inflation, 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 also consists of unemployment, rate, as well as the interest rates. Interest rates. So meaning to say, the business has no control over inflation. So when inflation increases, for example, inflation increases the cost of production. It means raising the cost of production. The cost of production rises, right? If the inflation increases, the cost of production increases, right? Let's move on to another factor, which is technological factor. Technological factor or environment. Technological environment. Technological environment. Right. Technological environment, where we're talking about new technology and innovation. Right. You can see we're talking about the advancement of technology. The advancement of technology. Right. So if you can know that even you can see that technology is advancing, right? Advancing, right? We're talking about the new technology and technology and innovation. There are new innovations that uh, uh, are done, right? So you can find that the business has no control over technological advances. So the business has to update its system in order to stay in business, right? In terms of technology, technological advances, technological advances, advances, technological advances, force businesses to update systems, to update systems. So if the business does not update its systems or does not move with the technological advancement, it will lose a business. It will lose businesses, right? Another factor, which is another environment which the business has no control over, is political environment. Political environment. Political environment. Political environment. Political environment. Political environment. Right. So political environment, you're talking about uh, uh, new business policies, right? New business policies as well as stability, political stability. New business policies, right? Government policies regarding business, government policies regarding uh, government policies regarding businesses, government policies regarding businesses, as well as uh, government stability. A stable political environment favors what? Businesses. Right. So a business has no control over the political environment. The business has no control over the political environment, right? So meaning to say new labor laws increase compliance cost for the business. The new labor laws increases compliance cost to the business. Right? New labor laws increases what? Um, New labor laws increases compliance cost for the business. So to understand that some businesses might end up maybe relocating to other countries because of the government policies, right? Another factor that can also, or environment that can also affect the business is another factor that can affect the business is the international and global environment. International and global environment, right? International or a global environment, right? So global environment is about global trade and exchange rates. Global trade and exchange rate. global trade and exchange rate. It also affects the business, and the business has no control over the exchange rate. It has no control over the exchange rate and also the global trade. The business has no control over these activities. Right? There's no control at all over these activities. Right? Another environment is what we call legal environment. Legal environment, which are laws such as Labor Relations Act, as well as Consumer Protection Acts, consumer laws. We have BCEA and Labor Relations, etc. We also have laws like e.g. Consumer Protection Act, which is what we call consumer laws. Consumer laws. Consumer, not customer. Consumer Protection Acts. Right. Right. We also have another environment, which is the social environment. The social environment. The social environment. The social environment. Right. Social environment are this includes the values, the culture, the lifestyle, the educational levels of people who are living in a society. Right. These are values, consist of values, consist also of lifestyle, as well as educational factors. Educational factors or levels. Educational levels. All right. So these also affect or influence the business, and the business has no control over the lifestyle of people in the society. They have no control over the lifestyle and the educational levels of people within the society. Right. We also have another factor, which is the load shedding. The load shedding. Right. Load shedding, which also disrupt what? Also disrupt business operations. Also disrupt business operations. Right. And also the global economic recession. The global economic recession, right, which is the condition of the economy, right? So here it reduces what? This reduces what? Consumer spending. So meaning to say, if the country is experiencing economic recession, Customers tend to spend on basic products and services, not on luxury products like cars, etc. So there will be low spending on luxury products. Luxury products, right? Another factor that's also influence the business is the population growth. Population growth. Population growth. Right. Whereby we're talking about the increase. As the population grows, there will be increased demand for goods. There will be increased demand for goods and services, right? There will be increase. So the business has no control over the population growth, right? As well as the population decline. If there's a decline in population, meaning to say there is less or a low demand for goods and services. So the business has no control over the macro environment. Business has no control over the macro environment. The business has no control over the macro environment. It does not have any control. Does not have control over the what? The macro environment. So thank you so much for your time. Please do not forget to share, to subscribe, tell others, tell your friends, tell your colleagues, tell your classmates, tell your relatives about Metric Hub. Tell them to subscribe so that you all benefit from this content. Have a good day.